Even by the standards of the littlest indie stuff I usually cover, Mortal Glory 2 has got a style I'm gonna generously call efficient? It's not the kind of game that makes you wonder how the sausage is made. And even if it was, you could take a peek behind the scenes because this dev has been documenting the journey on his YouTube channel. Honestly, I didn't really pay it much mind when it found its way into my inbox, but I had a lull in my schedule and gave it a shot anyway. After multiple successful and failed runs over the course of 11 hours, my plea is that you don't dismiss this game based on its modest presentation. It is a by-the-books tactical roguelike, but it studied those books well, producing an experience with extensive team compositions, build variety, and lots of meaningful mid-run decision-making. Everything that exists peripheral to that team-building combat is a little workmanlike, and while there are some areas where that can be annoying, like the UI, Mortal Glory 2 is otherwise just like its strongest characters. Optimized workhorses that do one thing really, really well. The question of how Mortal Glory 2 compares as a sequel is not one that I can answer. The original 2020 release passed me by, so just keep in mind that this review isn't a comparative one. You don't need any of that history going in though, that's half the point. Our characters are random, our story is non-existent, and our setting is a gladiatorial arena. You start with a single weak hero that you'll want to reinforce with 3 teammates while gathering equipment and leveling up. In typical rogue fashion, you escalate on this 3-lane path, fighting tougher and tougher encounters on the way up. Once you're in a battle, you'll quickly realize that Mortal Glory is a game of numbers, knockbacks, and positioning. Your attack and movement resources are shared, and attacking ends your turn, which means overall mobility is low. That fact is extra dangerous because there are pitfalls and plenty of other environmental hazards that you can be bumped into. Knockback isn't some fringe ability you build towards, it's tied directly to the core strength stat. So you're probably going to have at least one Minotaur or something on your team that's tossing people around like they're nothing and taking advantage of all those damage bonuses that walls and barrels can help produce. The enemy team probably will too. Another core tenet of Mortal Glory is symmetry. The NPCs are beholden to the same movement and build rules that you are, and at any time you can mouse over an enemy and see what spells and equipment they're working with. There's also rigid line of sight rules that almost every ability in the game follows, so sound mid-fight strategies will involve some variation of creating human shields for your wizards, and abusing the cover the randomly located pillars can provide, like you're playing some sort of turn-based World of Warcraft PvP. It's a blast when you're able to set up and execute a working strategy. The simplicity and transparency of the plays your opponents have means that oftentimes the best tactics are the least abstract ones, baiting, flanking, and ducking for cover. Where Mortal Glory is at its best, though, is in what happens between rounds. It's a playable invitation to dork out over scaling and optimizing. You get lots of options because of a classless character system. Everyone starts out with a free racial ability and some dice-rolled starter stats, but from there they can go in any direction. After every fight you'll get some combination of weapons, accessories, and spell grimoires which you can use to teach any of your fighters the spell within. There's never any stat prerequisites, so if you want to accent your beefy, strengthy warrior dude with a magic missile to handle runners, you can. It's transparent about what everything scales with and how hard that scaling is, so the best team compositions are usually ones that are flexible enough to take advantage of all the drops you get, but also prioritize giving the best equipment to the key fighters that make your strategy work. One of my first successful runs was when my Berserker got an upgrade that allowed him to cast multiple attacks in one turn at the cost of tripling their cooldown. Normally that's a steep punishment, but you're really only paying that price in the long term, so I pivoted my entire strategy around funneling him the best gear and upgrades, plus a spell that gained damage on kill, so he could try to cut down the enemy team before that downside was one I had to pay. In another one of my runs, I had a more even power distribution, with a mage blasting from afar, a summoner flooding the field with creatures, and a rogue-like character with high agility who compensated for his low vitality with stealth and isolation bonuses that let him go for single-hit kills. Even the most straightforward of strategies feel great to pull off, thanks to the tight balance. The only inhibitor to a good time here is a really small one. That heavy tooltip usage that gives you all the juicy numerical transparency the game thrives on can sometimes get in the way of your clicks, where pop-up frames will block whatever you were trying to click on. You can partially mitigate this in the options menu by moving those tooltips to enemy click instead of enemy hover, but there's no equivalent for ability mouse over, which means the right-hand side of your screen can get really cramped with 4 abilities, 1 racial, and up to 2 item actives. Conversely, there's times where the UI isn't doing enough. I found myself wanting some sort of item comparison pop up to see the stats of an item I was acquiring, contrasted against the ones my team was already wearing. The absence of a feature like this is particularly noticeable in the shop, which does not show your equipment concurrently, demanding you jump back and forth between two screens multiple times for each exchange. But other than that, Mortal Glory 2 is a consistent distillation of RPG character building and turn-based strategy in a snacky and replayable rogue package, with all the long-term progression and difficulty hooks you'd expect. There's no escaping the minimum viable vibe it gives off for all of its inessential components, but for the actual game, I think it's kind of glorious.